The Chinese Communist Party and the Taliban are collaborating on something. China's foreign minister met this week with a delegation of high-level Taliban officials. It comes as ties between these two warm up ahead of the U.S. pullout from Afghanistan is finished, I should say. Now, the agenda was announced for the meeting. No agenda was announced for the meeting, but China has an interest, of course, in pushing the Taliban to deliver on those peace talks. They want what's inside Afghanistan, at least under the ground there. Let's welcome in now Gordon Chang, author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War and the Coming Collapse of China. Hey, Gordon, great to see you.
Hey, John.
All right, so CCP-Taliban collab. We also heard about Russia and China gearing up for more military drills next month. Both sides call it a display of mutual trust. Again, we see China really kind of stretching its wings and flexing its muscles here.
Well, we certainly do. You know, China has had a great relationship with the Taliban, even after 9/11. And so what we're seeing right now is a continuation of that policy. And right now, China believes that if it has those ties with the Taliban, it will be able to control Afghanistan. That's not the case, though. And I think that China is going to have big problems in Afghanistan, largely because the enemies of the Taliban, and they do exist, are going to become China's enemies.
Mm-hmm. And that, of course, is India as well. And, you know, some people say this is a sign of weakness from China because they are concerned about their hegemony in the region.
Well, yes. First of all, you know, they believe that their relationships with Pakistan are key, but there have been two terrorist incidents against Chinese nationals in Pakistan over the last 2.5, 3 weeks. One of them was quite serious. And I think we're going to go forward seeing that China will become more and more of a target as the United States leaves, because there will be that vacuum, and China is going to be the victim of that vacuum. Yeah. It will try to get themselves in, but it's going to get stuck like everybody else has.
Right. And if you believe the Taliban, and you see their interviews with media, they say the only reason they were fighting the Americans is because they were there. And if China's there, they will be the ones facing those targets. Also, we heard from President Biden this week, and here's what he said at the DNI office, quote, "I think it's more than likely we're going to end up, if we end up in a war, a real shooting war with a major power. It's going to be as a consequence of cyber security breaches." You know, I was pretty taken aback by that, you know, a real shooting war. And of course, he's talking about Russia.
Yeah, and you can also talk about China. You know, there was the Microsoft Exchange hack.
Yep.
And the Biden administration, and, you know, as serious as that was, the Biden administration has not imposed any costs on China for that, even though they've identified China as the culprit. And we've got to remember that these ransomware attackers, they're connected to the Ministry of State Security, as the Biden administration, to its credit, attributed. But you just can't attribute these attacks to China's regime and then not do anything about it, because otherwise there's going to be another attack down the road, and that will be very soon.
Right. It kind of reminds me of Biden's tough talk on Vladimir Putin when he called him a killer. And then, you know, that only caused more problems, and it just caused Russia to harden its stance on this whole thing, kind of speaking out of term there. That was a wild comment from the president. I also want to talk about something we saw this week that involved Senator Tom Cotton and executives from Coca-Cola and Visa. They were at a House hearing this week. And here's what the head of Coca-Cola's corporate sponsorships, he's also the VP of human rights or something like that. Here's what he had to say about the 2022 Winter Olympics, which are scheduled for Beijing.
So can you tell me why Coca-Cola doesn't have a say in whether it sponsors the genocide Olympics next year, but it does have a say in how the state of Georgia runs its election laws?
Senator, what I stated was that we do not have a say in the selection of the host city, nor on whether an Olympics is postponed or relocated.
Yeah, so you don't, but you could just make a statement. Your CEO could saddle up the same moral high horse that he got on when Georgia passed its election law and write a letter to the IOC and ask them to.
But yet Coca-Cola is not willing to do that. They're not willing to pull back on their sponsorship of the Olympics. They're not really willing to do anything that would send a message to the Communist Party in China that they're opposing them in any way.
Yeah, and it's because they are intimidated by China. You know, we live in a democracy where the president of the United States doesn't have that same coercive powers. And that's why Coca-Cola can make statements about election laws in the state of Georgia, but can't talk about genocide in China, where it also operates, of course.
Right.
And indeed, we've seen a number of companies take advantage of Uyghur and other slave labor. And that's just horrific.
Right. You know, Coca-Cola willing to criticize the state of Georgia where the company was founded and where its corporate headquarters are, but not willing to do the same for China. A lot of people scratching their heads about that. Another thing, too, we wanted to talk about, Gordon, these are some of the companies, by the way, that were also in that hearing and criticized for failing to support that bill in Congress, which is bipartisan support to hold China accountable for the Uyghur genocide in Xinjiang. You know, and again, we always show this video, too, of the cattle cars that these poor slaves were loaded onto. But there's Coca-Cola for you. Anyway, Gordon, we'll leave that aside for a second. Something else I wanted to talk to you about as well. Why don't we hear anything about the Delta variant in China and its rapid spread? I saw this video from Australia, which might be concerning to a lot of folks. They can at least see the shutdown here. But the Australian military is now helping enforce the lockdown inside Australia. You know, very close over there in Asia to China as well. But we don't hear about the Delta variant or lockdowns inside China. Why not?
Because Beijing has been very, very determined to prevent people from learning the extent of this disease. In the last couple days, though, John, Beijing had to relent because the outbreak of the Delta strain in Nanjing is, state media says, worse than in any other city after Wuhan. There's about 200 cases there they're admitting to, but there's obviously a lot more. It's spread to 5 provinces. This is one outbreak that started in the beginning of July, spread to 5 provinces, 13 cities, including Beijing. There are now testing 9.3 million people in Nanjing for this. This is actually a lot more serious than they're letting on.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, where real news for real people.